15 of the deadliest hitmen in New York were currently diving for cover, terrified of a horse. These were men who dissolved bodies in acid for a living. Yet here they were, trembling before a black Frisian stallion that looked like it had galloped straight out of hell. The boss, Dominic Moretti, had his gun drawn, ready to put a bullet in the beast's brain. But then, she stepped forward, a nobody, a pregnant maid with holes in her sneakers. She didn't have a whip. She had an apple core and a secret that would bring the Moretti empire to its knees. Watch carefully, because the most dangerous thing in this story isn't the Mafia Don. It's the girl with nothing left to lose. The rain over the Hamptons wasn't cleaning anything. It was just drowning the manicured lawns of the Blackwood estate in grey sludge. Dominic Moretti stood on the porch of the main house, the lit end of his cigar, the only warm colour in a freezing afternoon. He was 32, built like a prize fighter, and wore a bespoke charcoal suit that cost more than most people's annual rent. He was the Don of the Moretti crime family, a man who had secured the entire eastern seaboard's shipping routes by the time he was 25. He didn't tolerate incompetence, and right now he was watching 15 incompetent men try to die. "Hold the line, you idiots!" roared Silas, Dominic's head of security. Silas was a mountain of a man, an ex-Mossad operative who usually handled problems with a single knife stroke. Today, he looked like a panicked rodeo clown. In the center of the mud-churned paddock was Titan. Titan was a purebred Frisian stallion, 17 hands of pure muscle and malice. Dominic had imported him from the Netherlands 3 days ago. The horse had cost $500,000. Since arriving, Titan had bitten a groom's ear off, kicked a hole in the stable wall, and was currently rearing up on his hind legs, hooves slashing the air like guillotines. "Get the tranquilizer," Silas screamed, diving into the mud as a hoof missed his skull by inches. He crushed the rifle. One of the guards yelled back, scrambling over the wooden fence. Titan shrieked a sound that was less like a horse and more like a banshee. He slammed his front hooves down, shaking the ground. The guards scattered like roaches. Dominic sighed, dropped his cigar, and crushed it with his heel. He unbuttoned his jacket and reached for the .45 tucked in his waistband. He loved power, and he admired strength, but Titan was a liability. If the horse couldn't be broken, it had to be put down before it killed one of his top earners. "Clear out!" Dominic's voice boomed across the yard, cutting through the rain. It was a voice that didn't need to shout to be heard. It carried the weight of absolute authority. The guard scrambled back. Silas wiped mud from his eyes, panting. "Boss, give us 10 minutes. We can rope him." "You've had 3 days." "Silas," Dominic said, raising the gun. He leveled the sights on the white star in the center of Titan's forehead. The horse froze, nostrils flaring, sensing the intent. The animal stared right at Dominic, eyes rolling with wild, intelligent hate. "Waste of money," Dominic muttered, his finger tightening on the trigger. "Wait." The voice was so soft it shouldn't have been heard over the rain, but the sudden silence in the yard amplified it. Dominic didn't lower the gun, but he paused. "Who said that?" From the shadows of the servants' entrance, a figure emerged. She was wearing a baggy, grey uniform that was 2 sizes too big, soaked through to the skin. She held a plastic bucket against her chest as if it were a shield. It was the new maid, Oriana. Dominic vaguely remembered her file. Oriana Hart. 22. No family. Hired a month ago to scrub the floors and keep her head down. She looked like a stiff breeze would snap her in half. Her hair was matted with rain, plastering her pale face, but her eyes, oddly bright hazel eyes, were locked on the stallion. "Get back inside," Silas barked, stepping forward. "Do you want to die, girl?" "He's not crazy," Oriana said, her voice trembling, but her feet moving forward. She stepped into the mud. "He's in pain." "He's a killer," Dominic said coldly. "Move, Oriana. That's an order." Oriana ignored the order. It was the first time in 5 years anyone had ignored a direct order from Dominic Moretti. She walked past Silas. She walked past the line of armed guards who were looking at her like she was suicidal. She climbed through the wooden rails of the fence. Titan snorted, pawing the ground. He turned his massive head toward her, ears pinned back. He looked like a locomotive engine made of flesh and bone. He took a threatening step toward her. "Don't," Dominic warned, lowering the gun slightly, intrigued despite himself. "He'll trample you." Oriana stopped. She was 10 feet away from the beast. She didn't raise her hands. She didn't make shushing noises. She simply stood there, slumped slightly, looking exhausted. Then she reached into the pocket of her oversized apron. Every guard tensed, hands hovering over their holsters. In their world, reaching into a pocket meant pulling a weapon. Oriana pulled out a peppermint, a cheap red and white swirl candy she probably stole from the kitchen jar. Titan halted. The scent of sugar and peppermint cut through the smell of rain and fear. The horse stretched his neck out, sniffing. "It's okay," Oriana whispered. She didn't look at the horse's eyes. She looked at his flank. "I know. The strap under your belly. It's pinching the old scar. I saw it when they unloaded you." She took a step closer. Titan flinched. But he didn't strike. He was confused. This human didn't smell like testosterone, gun oil, and fear. She smelled like laundry detergent and milk. Oriana extended her palm, the peppermint sitting in the center. The tension in the yard was suffocating. 15 killers watched in silence. Dominic watched, his gun now lowered to his side, his dark brows furrowed. Titan lowered his head. His velvet nose brushed Oriana's calloused, shaking palm. He took the candy. Crunch. While he chewed, Oriana stepped in close, fearless. She slid her hand along the stallion's wet neck, murmuring things no one else could hear. Then, with surprising dexterity, she reached under the horse's belly, found the loose cinch strap from the transport halter that had been digging into his flesh, and unbuckled it. Titan let out a long, shuddering breath. His head dropped until it rested against Oriana's shoulder. The beast was tamed. Oriana stood there for a moment, her small hand stroking the black mane. Then, the adrenaline seemed to leave her all at once. She swayed. Her hand went instinctively to her stomach, clutching the fabric of her uniform. She looked up at the porch, meeting Dominic's gaze. For a second, Dominic saw something raw and terrified in her face, not fear of the horse, but fear of him. He just needed room to breathe, she whispered. Then, Oriana Hart's eyes rolled back in her head, and she collapsed face first into the mud. The medical wing of the Blackwood estate was better equipped than most city hospitals. It had to be. Moretti soldiers often came home with bullet holes they couldn't explain to the police. Dominic sat in a leather chair in the corner of the recovery room. The air smelled of antiseptic and espresso. Dr. Aris, the family's private physician, was wiping his hands on a towel. He was a greying man who had removed bullets from Dominic's father 30 years ago. "Well," Dominic asked. He wasn't looking at the doctor. He was looking at the girl sleeping in the hospital bed. Cleaned up. She looked even younger. Vulnerable. But he remembered the way she had walked toward that horse. That wasn't vulnerability. That was desperation. She's malnourished. Dominic? Doctor, Aris said, keeping his voice low. Anemic. Exhausted. She fainted from low blood sugar and stress. That's it. No. Doctor. Aris hesitated. He took off his glasses. She's also about 4 months pregnant. Dominic's eyes snapped to the doctor. Pregnant. She's hiding it well. Baggy clothes. But the baby is there. And Dominic, looking at the bruising on her arms and the healed fractures in her ribs, someone hurt this girl. Badly. Before she came to work for you. Dominic looked back at Oriana. Pregnant. A pregnant maid, taming a killer horse. Does she have a partner? Dominic asked. A boyfriend who visits. Security logs show she hasn't left the estate in the 30 days she's been employed, Silas said from the doorway. He was leaning against the frame, looking ashamed of the incident in the paddock. No visitors, no phone calls. She works. She eats scraps. She sleeps. She's a ghost. Boss. A ghost who humiliated my entire security team, Dominic said dryly. Silas flinched. I'll run a deeper background check. The first one came back clean. Oriana Hart, born in Ohio, moved here for work. Standard stuff. Do it again, Dominic commanded. Dig deeper. Women with clean pasts don't have broken ribs and the ability to calm Frisian stallions. And Silas, yeah, boss. Put a guard on her door. No one goes in or out without my say-so. Silas nodded and left. Dominic stood up and walked to the bedside. Oriana was stirring. Her eyelashes fluttered. And then those hazel eyes opened. Panic hit her instantly. She tried to sit up, gasping, but the IV line tugged at her arm. Easy, Dominic said. He didn't use his Don voice. He used a softer tone, the one he used before he decided whether or not to kill someone. Oriana froze. She looked at the IV, the silk sheets, and then at Dominic. She pulled the blanket up to her chin, her eyes darting to her stomach. You're in the medical wing, Dominic said, sitting on the edge of the bed. It was an invasion of space, calculated to test her reaction. She didn't flinch away. She went rigid. You fainted. I need to get back to work, Oriana stammered. The hallway on the 2nd floor isn't finished. You're pregnant, Oriana, Dominic said. He dropped the words like stones. Oriana's face went from pale to ghostly white. She stopped breathing. Who is the father? Dominic asked. There is no father, she whispered quickly. Too quickly. Immaculate conception. Dominic raised an eyebrow. I didn't know we were harboring saints. Please, sir! Oriana's voice cracked. Tears welled in her eyes. Please don't fire me. I can work. I'm strong. You saw I can handle things. I just need this job. I have nowhere else to go. Why did you intervene with the horse? Because you were going to shoot him. It's my horse, my property. He didn't do anything wrong. Oriana's voice suddenly gained strength, a flash of anger cutting through her fear. He was scared and in a new place, and people were screaming at him. He didn't deserve to die just because you couldn't control him. The silence stretched. Dominic stared at her. Most people who raised their voice at him ended up in the foundations of new construction projects. But Dominic felt a strange tug in his chest. He respected courage, even when it was stupid. You like horses? Dominic asked. I grew up around them, Before. Before what? Before I came here. She shut down again. The wall was back up. Dominic stood up. He walked to the door. You're off cleaning duty. Sir, please. You're strictly stable staff now. Dominic interrupted. Titan seems to like you. He's the only thing in this house that doesn't fear me. And apparently, he listens to you. You're in charge of him. If he hurts you, it's on your head. Oriana looked stunned. Thank you. Mr. Moretti. Dominic put his hand on the doorknob. And Oriana, doctor. Aris will be giving you vitamins and a proper diet. If that baby is born under my roof, it will be healthy. We don't starve children here. He stepped out into the hall, closing the door behind him. Silas was waiting. Boss, you're not actually keeping her. She's useful, Dominic said, his face hardening. But there's something she's not telling us. She walks like she's being hunted. Maybe she is, Silas suggested. Dominic lit a fresh cigarette. Then find out who is hunting her. Because if anyone is hunting my staff, they're hunting me. 2 months passed. The change in Titan was miraculous. The beast that had tried to kill 15 guards now followed Oriana around the paddock like a giant, dangerous dog. Oriana had filled out, too. The hospital meals and lack of heavy scrubbing had put some color in her cheeks, though she was still quiet, still jumping at loud noises. Her belly was beginning to show, a small curve beneath her heavy wool sweaters. She spent her days in the stables, far away from the main house and the comings and goings of the Mafia business. She felt safe there. But safety in the Moretti estate was an illusion. It was a Tuesday night when Dominic came to the stables. He usually ignored this part of the estate. But tonight, the stress of a failing deal with the Russians was eating him alive. He needed quiet. He found Oriana sitting on a hay bale, reading a paperback book aloud to Titan, who had his head resting on the stall door. It is a truth universally acknowledged. She read softly. Dominic leaned against a wooden pillar, listening. She had a nice voice. Soothing. Jane Austen? Dominic asked. Oriana jumped, nearly dropping the book. She stood up clumsily, trying to hide her stomach. Mr. Moretti, I didn't hear you. Titan didn't warn you. Dominic gestured to the horse. Titan was chewing hay, eyeing Dominic with suspicion, but no aggression. He knows you belong here, Oriana said. He only warns me about strangers. And am I a stranger, Oriana? Dominic walked closer. The air in the stable felt charged. Over the last few weeks, he had found himself watching her from his office window. There was a dignity to her poverty that fascinated him. You're the boss, Oriana said simply. You've been here 3 months. Silas still hasn't found a single record of a Oriana Hart existing before 2023. No high school transcripts, no driver's license history. You popped into existence 2 years ago. Oriana looked down at her boots. Paperwork gets lost. Not that much paperwork. Dominic stopped right in front of her. He could smell the vanilla scent of her shampoo. Who are you running from? No one. Liar. Dominic reached out and tilted her chin up. Her skin was soft, but her jaw was set in defiance. I can protect you, Oriana, but I can't protect a liar. For a moment, Oriana looked like she wanted to speak. Her lips parted. Suddenly, Titan whinnied a sharp, piercing sound. He kicked the stall door. Dominic spun around, hand going to his gun. The stable doors burst open, but it wasn't an assassin. It was Dante, Dominic's younger brother and underboss. Dante was wild, reckless, and smelled of cheap perfume and expensive vodka. "Dom, there you are." Dante stumbled in, laughing. "Silas said you were playing cowboy." Dominic relaxed slightly, but his eyes narrowed. "What do you want?" "Dante." Dante's eyes drifted past Dominic and landed on Oriana. A slow, predatory grin spread across his face. Well, is this the horse whisperer? Silas said she was a looker, but he didn't mention the glow. He gestured to her stomach. Oriana stepped back, her hand going to her belly protectively. She recognized Dante, not from the estate, but from the news, and from before. Her heart hammered against her ribs. "Please don't recognize me." Dante walked closer, ignoring Dominic. "You look familiar, sweetheart. Have we met maybe at the Golden Club in the city?" "I don't go to clubs," Oriana said, her voice tight. "Dante, back off," Dominic warned. "I never forget a face," Dante muttered, squinting at her. He reached out to touch a lock of her hair. Titan lunged. The stallion's teeth snapped inches from Dante's hand. Dante yelped and stumbled back, falling into a pile of hay. "You crazy mutt!" Dante pulled a pistol from his jacket. "No!" Oriana screamed, throwing herself in front of the stall door, shielding the horse with her own body. "Dante, put the gun away or I will break your arm," Dominic said. His voice was terrifyingly calm. Dante looked at Dominic, then at Oriana, then at the horse. He holstered the gun, laughing nervously. "Relax, brother. Just a joke. Jesus. This place is too uptight." He dusted himself off. "Russian meeting is rescheduled for midnight. Just came to tell you." Dante turned to leave, but he paused at the door. He looked back at Oriana, his eyes narrowed in calculation. "I know where I've seen you," he whispered, mostly to himself. "The senator's party, 2 years ago." He walked out into the rain. Oriana was trembling so hard her knees gave out. She sank onto the hay. Dominic was beside her in an instant. "He's drunk. He talks nonsense. He knows," Oriana whispered, tears streaming down her face. "He knows." "Knows what? That you were at a senator's party? Why does that matter?" Oriana looked up at Dominic, her eyes wide with terror. "Because the senator was murdered that night, and everyone thinks the killer got away." Dominic went still. The senatorial assassination was a massive cold case. It was rumored to be a hit ordered by the rival Falcone family. "You were there?" Dominic asked. "I was the catering staff." Oriana sobbed. "I was in the pantry. I saw who did it. I saw his face. He saw me." "Who was it?" "Oriana." Oriana shook her head, terrified. "If I say it, I'm dead. He's powerful, more powerful than the senator." "Look at me," Dominic commanded. He grabbed her shoulders. "You are under the protection of the Moretti family now. No one touches you. Who was it?" Oriana took a shaking breath. "It wasn't a Falcone. It wasn't a stranger." She looked at the stable door where Dante had just exited. "It was your brother. It was Dante." Dominic froze. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Dante reckless. Stupid Dante. A political assassin. "If Dante did it," Dominic said slowly. "He didn't do it alone. He's not smart enough to cover it up." "He wasn't alone," Oriana whispered. "There was a man with him. A man with a scar running through his eyebrow. They called him the Bishop." Dominic's blood ran cold. The Bishop was the code name for the corrupt chief of police. If Dante was working with the police chief, they weren't just killing senators. They were planning a coup to take over the Moretti family. Dominic stood up. Stay here. Lock the doors. Don't open them for anyone but me. Where are you going? Oriana cried. To find out if my brother is a traitor, Dominic said, checking his clip. And if he is, God help him. The air in the Moretti mansion felt different after Oriana's confession. It was thick, like the moments before a lightning strike. Dominic didn't confront Dante immediately. In the Mafia, a direct accusation without proof was a death sentence for the accuser, and if the traitor was blood, the proof had to be undeniable. Dominic spent the next 48 hours in his study, a room lined with leather-bound books and monitors displaying every inch of the estate. He watched the feed from the stables. He watched Oriana. She spent her time grooming Titan, her movements rhythmic and mechanical. She was terrified, but she was also a mother-to-be. She needed to survive. Dominic found himself fascinated by her resilience. She had witnessed a murder by one of the most dangerous men in the city, fled her life, changed her name, and survived on the streets while carrying a child all before she turned 23. Silas, Dominic said into his intercom. The head of security appeared a moment later. Boss, check the private accounts of the police pension fund. Look for offshore transfers to a shell company called Apex Logistics, and find out where Dante was the night Senator Sterling was killed. Don't use the family servers. Use the dark web relay. Silas's eyes widened. Dante. You think? I don't think. I know, Dominic snapped. And Silas double the guards on the stables. But tell them to stay out of sight. If Titan sees them, he'll lose his mind. And if the girl sees them, she'll think I'm holding her prisoner. Aren't you? Silas asked boldly. Dominic looked at the screen, where Oriana was leaning her forehead against Titan's neck. I'm keeping her alive. There's a difference. By midnight. The proof arrived. Silas dropped a folder on Dominic's desk. It contained photos grainy, taken from a distance of Dante Moretti, shaking hands with Chief Miller, the bishop in a derelict warehouse in Queens. The date stamp was from 3 days ago. They're planning to move during the gala, Silas whispered. The annual Moretti charity ball. It's the only time the whole family is in one place, without heavy artillery. Dante is going to let the police raid the event, kill you in the crossfire. And then Dante takes the throne with the chief in his pocket. Dominic felt a cold rage settle in his marrow. Betrayal by a soldier was business. Betrayal by a brother was a sin that required a biblical response. And the girl, Dominic asked. Dante's been asking questions around the kitchen. He knows she's the witness from the Sterling hit. He's going to clean her up before the gala starts. Dominic stood up, his chair screeching against the hardwood. Let him try. The night of the Moretti gala arrived. The estate was transformed into a sea of black ties, silk gowns, and $5,000 bottles of champagne. Underneath the elegance, the air hummed with the tension of a ticking bomb. Dominic moved through the crowd, shaking hands and accepting tributes, his face a mask of bored royalty. He saw Dante across the room, looking manic, his eyes darting to the entrance. Enjoying yourself, brother? Dominic asked, sliding up beside him. Dante jumped, spilling a drop of gin on his sleeve. Yeah, Dom, great party. Best one yet. It'll certainly be a night to remember, Dominic said, his voice like velvet over a blade. Meanwhile, a mile away at the stables, the silence was broken by the crunch of tires on gravel. Oriana was in Titan's stall, hiding. She had sensed the shift in the wind hours ago. She had packed a small bag, but she knew she wouldn't get past the front gates. She had stayed with the only living thing that didn't want something from her. The stable door groaned open. 3 men walked in. They weren't wearing the Moretti colors. They were wearing tactical gear, the Bishop's personal hit squad. "Find the girl," a voice hissed. "The boss wants her gone before the fireworks start at the house." Oriana pressed herself into the corner of the stall. Titan felt her fear. He let out a low, guttural rumble, his ears flattening against his skull. "In here," one of the men said, kicking a stall door further down. Oriana knew she couldn't hide forever. She reached up and unlatched Titan's gate. She didn't have a saddle. She didn't even have a bridle. Just a lead rope and a heart full of fire. "Go, Titan," she whispered. "Get out of here." She tried to shoo him, but the horse wouldn't move. He stood like a sentinel between her and the aisle. The hitmen reached the stall. The lead man, a scarred veteran named Miller, laughed when he saw her. "There you are, the little maid who saw too much. Shame. You're kind of cute." He raised a suppressed pistol. Titan didn't wait. The stallion didn't just kick. He launched. He smashed through the wooden stall door like it was made of toothpicks. 1,700 pounds of muscle slammed into the hitman, sending him flying 30 feet into a stone wall. The sound of ribs snapping was like dry kindling breaking. The other 2 men opened fire. Thwip! Thwip! The bullets hissed through the air. One grazed Titan's flank, leaving a red streak on his midnight coat. The horse screamed, not in pain, but in fury. He reared up, his massive shadows dancing on the ceiling in the moonlight. "Titan!" "No!" Oriana screamed, but she wasn't stopping him. She was grabbing his mane. As Titan came down, his hooves crushed the second man's chest. The third man turned to run, but Oriana, fueled by an instinct she didn't know she had, whistled. Titan charged. He was a blur of black lightning. He cut the man off at the stable exit. Cornering him, Oriana slid down from the hayloft where she had scrambled. She walked toward the remaining hitman, who was shaking as he tried to unjam his weapon. "You shouldn't have come here," Oriana said. Her voice was cold, echoing Dominic's. "This is his home." Titan lunged, his teeth baring. He didn't kill the man, but he pinned him against the wall with his massive chest, the man's breath escaping in a wheeze. Suddenly, the stable was flooded with light. Dominic stood at the entrance. His tuxedo jacket was gone, his white shirt stained with blood, Dante's blood. Behind him, Silas and a dozen loyal guards stood with rifles raised. Dominic looked at the carnage, 1 man dead, 1 dying, and 1 pinned by a horse. Then he looked at Oriana. She was standing in the center of the chaos, her hand on Titan's nose, her eyes fierce and protective. Dominic walked toward her, stepping over the debris. He stopped a foot away. He looked at the scratch on Titan's leg, then at Oriana's trembling hands. "Are you hurt?" he asked. "I'm fine," she whispered. "But they tried. They were going to—" "I know," Dominic said. He reached out, and for the first time, he didn't touch her chin to intimidate her. He tucked a stray hair behind her ear. "It's over, Oriana. Dante is in the cellar. The bishop is being retired as we speak." He looked at the stallion. Titan huffed, blowing hot air against Dominic's chest. Dominic didn't flinch. He reached out and placed a hand on the horse's neck. "You did well. Beast," Dominic murmured. He turned back to Oriana. "The world thinks the witness to the Sterling murder died tonight in a stable fire. I've already had the secondary barn torched. As of tomorrow, Oriana Hart doesn't exist." Oriana's heart skipped. "Then, who am I?" Dominic's gaze darkened with a possessive heat that made her breath catch. "You are whatever you want to be. But if you stay, You'll be the woman who tamed the Moretti family, and your child will never know a day of fear." The silence that followed the night of the failed coup was louder than the gunfire had been. The Blackwood estate, once a place of bustling criminal activity, had been transformed into a gilded fortress of isolation. To the outside world, Dominic Moretti had simply tightened his grip, pruning the weak branches of his family tree. But inside the limestone walls, the atmosphere was thick with the scent of lilies and the oppressive weight of things left unsaid. Oriana had been moved. She was no longer scrubbing the marble floors of the foyer or sleeping in the drafty servants' quarters. Dominic had installed her in the East Wing, a sprawling suite of rooms decorated in shades of cream and gold, with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the paddock. He provided her with the finest silks, a private chef, and enough books to fill a small library. Yet, for all the luxury, the guards at her door didn't face outward to protect her. They faced inward to watch her. She was 8 months pregnant now. The slender, fragile girl who had walked into the path of a rampaging stallion had vanished, replaced by a woman who carried the heavy burden of her child with a quiet, weary dignity. Her belly was a prominent curve beneath her cashmere sweaters, a constant reminder of the life growing inside her, a life that Dominic Moretti had claimed as his own responsibility. Dominic, however, was changing. The man who had once ruled New York with a heart of flint was becoming obsessed. He spent his days in his study, ignoring the calls from the commission and the grumblings of his capos. Instead, he watched the security monitors. He watched Oriana rid to the baby. He watched her brush her hair. He watched her stand by the window and stare at Titan, who roamed the paddock like a restless shadow. One evening, as a bruised purple sunset bled across the Atlantic horizon, Dominic entered her suite. He didn't knock. He never did. He found Oriana sitting on the velvet chaise lounge, a book of poetry forgotten in her lap. "You didn't eat your dinner," Dominic said, his voice a low vibration in the quiet room. He walked over to the small table where a plate of untouched sea bass sat cold. "I wasn't hungry, Mr. Moretti," she replied, not looking at him. "Dominic," he corrected her, his eyes narrowing. "I've told you to call me Dominic. You aren't a servant anymore." "Oriana." "Then what am I?" she asked, finally turning her hazel eyes toward him. They were sharp, filled with a defiance that no amount of silk could soften. "I can't leave. I can't speak to anyone. My every move is recorded. If I'm not a servant, I must be a prisoner." Dominic stepped closer, the heat radiating from his body. He reached out, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. It was a gesture that hovered dangerously between a caress and a threat. "You are the mother of a child born under my protection. That makes you the most precious thing in this house. In my world, precious things are kept behind iron bars." "Is that why you kept your brother behind iron bars?" "Too." The air in the room seemed to vanish. Dominic's hand dropped. His face, usually an unreadable mask of Roman features, twitched with a sudden, violent spark of emotion. "What did you say, Dante?" she whispered, though she knew that wasn't the brother she meant. "You told me he was in the cellar. You told me the unreliable elements were gone. But there are ghosts in this house. Dominic, I hear them when the wind blows off the ocean." Dominic turned away, walking to the window. Below, Titan let out a lonely whinny, the sound echoing through the salt air. "Dante was a traitor. He chose his path. I merely gave him the end he deserved." "And Leo?" Oriana's voice was barely a breath, yet it hit Dominic like a physical blow. Dominic froze. He didn't move for a long time. The name Leo hadn't been spoken in the Moretti house for a decade. Leo was the eldest, the golden boy, the one who was supposed to take the throne before he died in a car accident in the mountains of Italy. "Leo is dead," Dominic said, his voice sounding as if it were coming from the bottom of a well. "He died 10 years ago." "Did he?" Oriana stood up, moving toward him with a slow, heavy gait. She reached into the pocket of her cardigan and pulled out a small, crumpled piece of paper. It was a photograph, old and worn at the edges. Dominic took it, his fingers trembling almost imperceptibly. The photo showed a man standing in a sun-drenched field of sunflowers in Ohio. He looked remarkably like Dominic, the same broad shoulders, the same dark hair, but his eyes were different. They were kind. They held no shadow of the underworld. Next to him stood a younger Oriana, laughing, her head resting on his shoulder. "I didn't know who he was when I met him," Oriana said, her voice trembling. "He told me his name was Leo Hart. He told me he was a carpenter from Chicago. We lived in a small cabin near the woods for a year. He was the only person who ever looked at me and didn't see someone to be used. He was hiding. Dominic. He told me he had a brother who was a king, and a brother who was a snake, and he had to die so that the king could live in peace." Dominic stared at the photo. The accident in Italy had been a ruse. Leo hadn't died. He had run. He had chosen a life of obscurity over a life of blood. Dominic had spent 10 years mourning a man who had been alive and happy in a sunflower field, while Dominic was drowning in the filth of the Moretti legacy. 2 years ago, Oriana continued, her tears finally falling, Leo heard that Dante was planning something. He heard that Dante was working with the chief of police to dismantle everything your father built. Leo couldn't stay away. He told me he had to go to New York to talk to a senator, someone who could help him stop Dante without hurting you. He told me to wait for him at the catering entrance of the Sterling estate. He was going to take me away. We were going to go to Canada. She took a gasping breath, clutching her stomach as a sharp pain flared. I waited. I stood in that pantry with the smell of hors d'oeuvres and expensive perfume. And then I heard the shots. I saw Dante walk out, wiping blood from his cuff. And then I saw Leo. He was on the floor. He wasn't a carpenter anymore. He was just a body. Dominic crumpled the photo in his fist. The betrayal he had felt from Dante was a flickering candle compared to the supernova of rage currently burning through his veins. Dante hadn't just killed a senator. He had murdered the brother who had sacrificed everything to give Dominic a clear path to the throne. "And the baby?" Dominic asked, his voice a terrifying whisper. "It's Leo's," Oriana sobbed. "I found out a month after he died. I was terrified. Dante's men were everywhere, looking for the girl who saw the hit. I changed my name. I moved. But I realized I couldn't hide forever. I thought, well, if I could just get inside your house, if I could just be a maid. I thought you were the only man who could protect Leo's son. Even if you never knew who he was." Dominic turned back to her. The possessive heat in his eyes hadn't faded. It had evolved. He looked at the woman who had loved his brother, who had carried his brother's blood into the heart of the enemy's camp, and who had tamed a horse that no one else could touch. "You lied to me," Dominic said. He stepped so close their chests touched. He could feel the baby his nephew kick against his own heart. "Every time I touched you, Every time I thought about making you mine, you were mourning him. I was trying to survive, Oriana cried. You did more than survive. Oriana, Dominic said, his hand moving to her neck, his grip firm but not crushing. You brought the ghost of the only man I ever loved back into this house. You think you're a prisoner. You're wrong. You're the queen of a kingdom that is currently burning to the ground. He let go of her and walked to the door. Silas! He roared. The head of security appeared instantly. Boss! The Falcones are coming, Dominic said, his eyes fixed on the middle distance. Dante's death wasn't the end of it. They know about the girl. They know she's the key to the Sterling hit, and now they know she's carrying the true Moretti heir. They'll be here before dawn. What do we do? Silas asked. Dominic looked back at Oriana, who was huddled on the chaise, looking small and terrified. Then he looked out at the paddock, where Titan stood, waiting in the dark. We stop being kings, Dominic said. And we start being monsters. Dominic turned to Oriana, his expression softening into something she had never seen before, a look of absolute, sacrificial resolve. Prepare yourself, Oriana. Tonight, we find out if that horse of yours can truly run like the devil is chasing him, because he is. The air at 3 a.m. was not just cold. It was heavy with the metallic tang of salt spray and the electric hum of an approaching storm. Inside the master suite of the Blackwood estate, Dominic Moretti was no longer the polished don who sat at the head of the commission. He had stripped off his bespoke charcoal jacket, rolling up his white sleeves to reveal forearms corded with tension and scarred from a youth spent in the trenches of the Brooklyn docks. He checked the action on his custom point, 4-5, the click of the slide echoing like a death knell in the silent room. The perimeter is breached, Silas's voice crackled over the radio, stripped of its usual professional calm. 3 SUVs just smashed through the south gate. They aren't trying to be quiet. Boss, this is a scorched earth play. The Falcones sent everyone. Dominic looked at Oriana. She was pale, her hand gripping the back of a velvet chair as another contraction rippled through her. The stress of the revelation of Leo, of the lies, of the impending violence had pushed her body into early labor. She wasn't just a witness anymore. She was a woman on the brink of bringing a new life into a world that wanted to snuff it out. We don't go to the panic room, Dominic said, his voice a low, steadying anchor. The panic room is a coffin if they have enough C4. We go to the stables. The stables, Oriana gasped, her breath coming in short. Ragged bursts. Dominic. I can't run. You don't have to run, Dominic said, stepping toward her. He didn't ask for permission. He swept her up into his arms, ignoring her small cry of surprise. He carried her not toward the grand staircase, but toward the service elevator that led to the tunnels beneath the estate tunnels, built during Prohibition, that ran straight to the cliffs and the outbuildings. As they descended, the first explosion rocked the house. The chandeliers above groaned, and the distant sound of shattering glass and automatic gunfire filtered through the stone walls. The Falcones weren't here to negotiate. They were here to erase the Moretti name from history. The tunnel was damp and smelled of earth and old secrets. Dominic moved with the predatory grace of a man who had spent his life preparing for this exact moment of collapse. When they emerged into the stable, the scene was chaos. The smell of smoke was already drifting from the main house, and the horses were screaming in their stalls. Sensing the encroaching fire and the vibration of the kill, Titan was the worst of them. The black stallion was rearing, his hooves smashing against the reinforced oak of his stall door. He looked like a creature of ancient myth, his eyes rolling white in the darkness, "Put me down," Oriana whispered. Dominic set her on a bale of hay. She crawled toward Titan's stall, her voice a soft, melodic contrast to the thudding of gunfire outside. "Titan, Titan, look at me. It's okay. It's just us." The horse froze. He lowered his head, blowing a hot, frantic breath against Oriana's cheek. In that moment, the bond between the broken girl and the broken beast was the only stable thing in a world of madness. Silas Dominic shouted as the head of security burst through the stable's side entrance, blood blooming on his shoulder. "They're in the yard. Boss. We've got maybe 2 minutes before they realize we aren't in the main house." Dominic turned to Oriana. He grabbed a heavy wool blanket and wrapped it around her, then helped her up. He didn't have a saddle, and there was no time for a bridle. He grabbed a simple lead rope and clipped it to Titan's halter. "You have to go through the back woods," Dominic said, his eyes locking onto hers. "The Falcones have the roads blocked for 5 miles in every direction, but they don't know the deer trails. Titan does. He'll take you to the old boathouse at the cove. Silas's men have a skiff waiting there. They'll take you to Montauk." Oriana gripped his forearm, her fingers digging into his skin. "You're coming with us. You have to. I'm the target." "Oriana," Dominic said, and for the first time, he smiled. It wasn't the smile of a businessman. It was the smile of a man who had finally found something worth dying for. "If I'm on that horse, they'll hunt you until the ends of the earth. If I stay here, I'm the only thing they'll see. I'm the distraction. Dominic, now listen to me." He grabbed her face, his thumbs wiping away her tears. "That baby. Leo's son. He's the best of us. He's the only part of my brother that Dante didn't manage to kill. You keep him safe. You tell him about the carpenter from Ohio. You don't ever tell him my name. You hear me?" Oriana sobbed, nodding as another contraction hit. Dominic hoisted her up. It was a struggle. Her weight shifted by the pregnancy. But Titan stood like a statue of granite as she climbed onto his broad, muscular back. She twined her fingers into his thick mane. "Go!" Dominic roared, slapping the stallion's flank. Titan didn't hesitate. He surged forward, his hooves thundering on the stable floor. He didn't go for the door. He went for the wide, open window of the exercise arena. With a powerful leap, the stallion cleared the sill, disappearing into the pitch-black woods just as the first Falcone hitmen rounded the corner of the building. Dominic watched them go for a heartbeat, the image of the girl and the horse etched into his mind. Then, he turned back to the entrance. He picked up a second submachine gun from a fallen guard. The next 10 minutes were a blur of fire and lead. Dominic Moretti fought like a man possessed. He used the stalls for cover, moving through the shadows of the stable he had once ignored. He was a ghost in a tuxedo, a reaper in the dark. He took down 4, 5, 6 men, his movements a brutal ballet of necessity. But there were too many. A bullet caught him in the thigh, sending him to one knee. Another grazed his ribs. He leaned against the stone pillar of the stable entrance, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Through the trees, he heard it a distant, triumphant whinny. Titan had reached the ridge. They were clear. Dominic let out a blood-soaked laugh. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his gold lighter. The smell of gasoline was heavy now. The Falcones had begun tossing Molotov cocktails. "Come and get it, you bastards," he yelled, his voice echoing over the roar of the flames. As the Falcone soldiers closed in, their shadows long and monstrous against the burning estate. Dominic didn't feel fear. He felt a strange, shimmering peace. He had spent his life building a kingdom of ash, but in his final hour, he had saved a prince. 6 months had passed since the night the Blackwood estate burned to the ground. The news had called it a mob war massacre. The bodies of Dominic and Dante Moretti were never officially identified in the rubble, but the empire had collapsed overnight, its assets seized or bled dry by rivals. In a small, quiet town in upstate New York, far from the reach of the city, a woman sat on a porch. She was wearing a simple denim shirt and leggings, her hair tied back in a messy knot. In her arms, a baby boy with dark, inquisitive eyes and a shock of black hair was drifting off to sleep. Oriana looked out at the rolling pasture. In the distance, a massive black Frisian stallion was galloping along the fence line. He was older now, scarred by a bullet graze on his flank, but he moved with the same untamable fire he had shown on the day he arrived at Blackwood. The sound of a car engine made her tense, a reflex she couldn't quite shake. An old, beat-up truck pulled into the driveway. A man got out. He moved with a slight limp, his face marked by a jagged scar that ran from his temple to his jaw, but his eyes were clear. It was Silas. He had survived the cove, though barely. He didn't say much. He never did. He just walked up the porch steps and handed her a small, heavy envelope. "It's from the offshore account," Silas said quietly. "Enough to keep the farm running for 3 lifetimes. And a new identity for the boy when he's ready." Oriana looked at the envelope, then at her son. "Do you think he'd be proud?" Silas looked out at the stallion, who had stopped his gallop to stare at them. His head held high. "I think he'd say you tamed the only things that mattered, Oriana." Oriana looked down at the baby. "His name is Leo," she whispered, "but his middle name is Dominic." As the sun began to set over the peaceful valley, the stallion let out a long, resonant whinny that seemed to echo through the hills, a final salute to the king who had died so that the beast and the beauty could live. And that is the end of the Moretti legacy, a story that began in blood and ended in the quiet peace of an upstate farm. Dominic Moretti chose to be the monster so that a new generation could be free, proving that even the most hardened hearts can find redemption in the face of true innocence. If this story gripped you from start to finish, please give us a thumbs up. Your support keeps these stories coming. Share this video with someone who loves a mix of mafia drama and epic romance, and make sure to subscribe and hit that bell icon so you're the first to know when our next cinematic tale drops. What did you think of the ending? Was Dominic a hero or a villain? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next story.